like to call to order the Monday, May 6th public hearing for the City of Tampa's Architectural Review Commission. Welcome, everyone. I'm Dan Myers. I am the Vice Chair of the Commission. If you are here to present a project, you will have limited time to make your presentation, so we suggest being thorough but concise. When coming to the microphone, you will need to identify yourself and your relationship to the project. The commissioners will not ask any questions during your presentation. Your project should be presented in the following order: site plan, elevations, architectural details, and wall sections. First, staff presents the staff report. We will then ask for public comment. Please state and spell your name clearly if you are here to speak for or against a project. Your time will be limited to 3 minutes, so take some time now to summarize your comments because 3 minutes goes by very quickly. Following public comment, the commissioners will ask questions in the same order as the presentation. Next, the applicant will have 5 minutes for rebuttal. The public hearing will then be closed. After the public hearing is closed, no further testimony can be given. The commissioners will then discuss the case and make their decision based on Chapter 27 of the City Code of Ordinances, the design guidelines, the Secretary of Interior Standards, the Historic Preservation Development Review Committee comments, and the testimony given at the public hearing. The ARC can only act on items that are within our specific jurisdictional responsibility. Owner agents are independently responsible to obtain any appropriate permits and/or approvals. If you haven't already done so, please silence your cell phones. And now we'll ask the commissioners to introduce themselves, starting on my left.
Hi, good evening. My name is Carol Post, and I'm the Public Policy Representative to the Commission. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Elena Paris-Ketchum. I am the attorney member for the ARC.
Hi, I'm Brian Hammond. I'm architectural member. My name's John Prokop. I practice architecture.
And we would like to especially welcome the commissioners to my left and my right, my immediate left and right, who are in their first meeting this evening. Welcome, Brian and Elena. Let's see, now we'd like to introduce the staff. Dennis Fernandez, Ron Vila, Elaine Lund, Alexis Guzman, and attorney Dana Crosby-Collier. Mr. Fernandez.
Good evening, Commissioners. Dennis Fernandez, Architecture Review and Historic Preservation Manager. If we could move the minutes from the April 1st, 2024 public hearing.
I move that we accept the April 1st, 2024 public hearing minutes into the record.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, those are approved.
Thank you. Just a couple brief announcements. First of all, I did want to also reiterate our thanks to Commissioners Hammond and Ketchum for volunteering your time and expertise to the board. We look forward to working with you, and always please let us know if you require anything, any information or clarification. We're here to assist you. Next, I do want to announce that we are handling the May cycle of applications this evening, so we will not be holding a meeting on Wednesday, May 8th. And lastly, want to enter the April 2024 staff approvals into the record, and we can accept those by motion at the end of the meeting. With that, I did want to turn the floor over to Elaine Lund, who is going to be presenting this month's Preservation in Progress.
Thank you. Elaine Lund, Historic Preservation staff. This month we're looking at some infill construction in the Tampa Heights Historic District to highlight a few properties and projects that were approved by this board, by the ARC. and show you how they have helped fill in a few vacant parcels along a block in the northern end of the historic district. You can see the map of the Tampa Heights Historic District on your screens, and with the arrow pointing to the block in question along Adderley Street. This is the 1915 Sanborn map, an early one showing the block with its, red parcels, the subject parcels shown in red. At the time, they were vacant, and they have, I believe, remained vacant through since then. This is the 2022 aerial map, again showing the location of the subject parcels. Adderley Drive runs east-west, and this section of the block is between Florida Avenue and North Morgan Street. The parcels back up to Shady Lane Street. So they have kind of a different configuration than many other parcels in the historic district zoning-wise. They are considered to have two fronts rather than a front and a rear because they have two streets. So the ARC reviewed and approved these projects at its February 9th, 2022 public hearing. The first one we'll look at here is the 207 East Adderley Street, which was new construction for a single-family residence with site improvements. This project has the parking coming off the Adderley Street front. And I believe this is the project, yes, this is the project with the porte cochere. It is the westernmost of the three projects that we're looking at this evening here. Directly adjacent to that at 211 East Adderley Street, another single-family residence, this time with the parking coming off of Shady Lane Street. And this one at the corner with the parking coming off Shady Lane Street as well, with Morgan Street running along its east side. These are the elevations, the front elevations of the approved projects. You see the one-story building with the porte cochere at 207 Adderley, and the two-story buildings at 211 and 213 Adderley Street. 213 Adderley Street, being a corner property, does have a wraparound porch, which is consistent with the design guidelines for the Tampa Heights Historic District. And these are photographs showing the finished projects. And then finally, just to show you, this is how the block appeared in 2019. Prior to the new construction. And it's basically served as a storage yard for auto improvement company. And this is how it looks now with the infill construction. So we're think that this is a grand improvement, and thought the board would enjoy seeing this update. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. I think you can see it's very dramatic. We try to bring you the dramatic ones. But taking a block that was essentially undeveloped since the inception of the city and served as a salvage yard and turning it back in and integrating it into the neighborhood, I think is a great accomplishment. Next, we will move on to the disclosure of conflicts of interest and ex parte communication with our legal counsel.
Good evening. Dana Crosby Collier from the City Attorney's Office. I'd like to ask if any member of the commission has a conflict of interest with any item on the agenda this evening?
I have none.
Okay, and thank you. Has any member engaged in ex parte communication with regard to any agenda item this evening?
I have
I have not.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on, we do not have any continuations to act upon this evening, so we can move to the swearing. Anyone who is going to be providing testimony or presenting this evening, if you could please stand and raise your right hand, including staff.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you'll be providing today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
We are now ready for our first case, which Mr. Vila will present.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ron Vila, I'm staff for Historic Preservation. Our first case is ARC 24-000032. This is for the address of 1800 West Richardson Place. This is in the Hyde Park Historic District. There is a contributing structure on site that dates back to 1921. The underlying zoning is RS 60. The total square footage is under the allowed 900 for an RS 60 zoning classification at 896. The request is for a certificate of appropriateness for new construction for an accessory structure with site improvements. If you look on page 3 of your staff report, there's some previous action on this site, that there was a request for the demolition of a contributing structure. That was the accessory structure that was on site, and it received approval on April 1st, 2024. And also at that same public hearing, they did request for their certificate of appropriateness. They needed some additional information, and that's why they're here this evening. Moving to the photo presentation. I'd like to start with the overall vicinity map. This is showing the property in question down here in the green, just so you get an understanding of where it fits in the whole vernacular of the neighborhood. This is the 1929 Sanborn map that has the outline of the historic district in red. And then you see the proximity to the bay. Although it is very close to Bayshore Boulevard, it is not within FEMA's boundaries, so no special treatment is needed for the structure as it is situated on the site. This is just a little closer shot of that 1929 Sanborn map. Property is highlighted in green. It sits on the corner of Richardson Place and Gunby. If you look at the Sanborn map, it tells us a lot. The property in question, the illustration is in red, which means it is in brick, is the main floor, the first floor, and then the second floor, the pop-up, is in yellow, which means it's frame construction. And then you see some other yellow, which is indicating some porches at the time that this was inventoried. This is looking at the front elevation, which is the primary facade, looking at Richardson Place. Just another angle of that front elevation. I wanted to zoom in a little bit, see if it came in clear. There was some discussion at the prior public hearing of the corner boards. So you see the termination of the two sides, how it comes together with a quarter round, and then you see how the windows are trimmed out as well. Staying with that front elevation, just zooming in on the overhangs, you see the barge rafter and then the gable vent. This is moving around the house, so you get an understanding of how the character-defining features come into place. This is the front elevation that we just saw, and then wrapping around to the east elevation. Once again, you see the brick on the main floor, and then a frame up top. That's the front portion of that east elevation, and going along the rear. And then going to the back elevation. You see the exposed rafter tails up here. Then once again, the barge rafters, the gable vents, and then the fly rafters. Looking down the street, which is Gumby. This is the fence that encompasses the rear yard. There's a gate that is an operable gate that slides along the fence line. And then just the last picture I'm going to show, well, you see the apron coming up, you see the historic materials as the granite, you see the apron, the sidewalk, and then this was the placement of the contributing accessory structure that was removed, and the two-story structure will be in about the same location. At this time, I'll have the owner address the board, and if you have any questions, I'll be here at the end of the public hearing. please pull up the PowerPoint. And then you have your clicker.
Got it.
Hi, my name is Mark Engel, I'm the homeowner. Starting again with the site plan, you can see the structure in the, well, the lower would be right-hand corner. It's shown being the placement having a 3.6 on one side and a 3 foot on the other, mainly due to the 18-inch overhang. Closer to the microphone? Very good, okay. You can't see it? Oh, it's up now? Okay. So, the recommendation, when I was here previously was that, or there was a suggestion that there wasn't enough room, given the orientation of the stairs exiting along the east side of the property, that there was enough space. So we talked about that and agreed, and so we decided to do, okay, is we are shifting the building 1 foot from the east, so we're actually going to a 4.6, and we decided to shift it 2 feet from the south side, which gave us more room for the hard surface, which is going to be flat stone at this point in time. As we can see here, also the apron for the driveway fits the period and is modeled on one of our neighbors. I will show that here. And so that is the apron that we wish to put into the space. The apron will have to be enlarged in the sidewalk in order to accommodate the 2-car width. And this is the elevation of the garage, looking at it from the north or Gunby. I put the reference in the lower right-hand corner, so the view is from the street. The garage door is shown here. There was a question about the garage door material, which I'll cover again in the last ARC board meeting, which I'll cover in subsequent slides, as well as the materials, although they're listed here, as you can see. There was a question also about the pitch. The pitch is a 412. It matches the pitch on the house. And the gable covering, or the gable ends, are lattice on the main structure, and we are mimicking that so that aesthetically ties it to the primary structure. The two structures in terms of design, as you can see, are not identical, given also that we have the corner board, which I'll cover in a moment, but this again hints back to the original design. Again, this just highlights that we're going from a 3.5 foot setback to a 4.5 setback on the east side, again allowing more space for a walkway for when one exits from the stairs. And then there was a question about the bottom trim window. There's a 4-inch bottom trim window for all windows. Again, that matches predominantly what's on the main structure. Again, hinting to or tying back to the main structure design. Corner boards, as Ron pointed out, the house has quarter rounds on the ends. I don't believe that those are original to the house. Somebody put the quarter rounds on at some point in the history of the home, but I do know that the 2-inch quarter boards are more traditional. So although it doesn't match the house, it does. It is period specific and appropriate. So we've included those into the design of the accessory structure. There was a question about the brackets. They were previously on the ends where the corner boards were. We moved them in, obviously, to accommodate for the corner boards. It also, again, matches a bit more slightly, or again, hints back to, not quite as extreme in as the original structure, but it hints back to the original structure, where there is braces in the front of the house. And that's shown here with the yellow arrows. You can see that up above. And then also it hints back or ties into the outriggers that are in the lower half of the house, the bottom first floor of the house, as you can see on the screen here. Elevation from the south, you can see that we have the HVAC under the stairs. Again, pointing back or noting again the 3.5 setback has been changed to 4.5 for more hardscape. Stairs are standard wood, 2x2 pickets, wood construction, top and bottom rail. There are 16 steps, I believe, going to the platform, so I assume fairly standard, certainly period appropriate. Elevation view from the west. This is what it would look like here. We're looking at the back of the stairs there. As is noted, they exit to the other side. And this again points out that we moved from a 3-foot setback to a 5-foot setback so that the hardscape, one would have room for landscaping, but also a generous hardscape in order to access the structure from the home pathway. And then elevation from the east, highlighting again that 5-foot setback for hardscape, but also the windows themselves are smaller, not visible necessarily from the road, but it provides privacy for the neighbors to the east, and shown here in the design. There was another question. There was a question last month regarding the height of the structure. The structure we're asking for is 22.6 inches. The house itself is 22.6 inches, but I'll point out that the property itself, the site, is on a grade, so actually it drops 2 feet from the front of the house to the back of to where the garage will, rather the accessory structure will be located. I would also like to point out that this is set at the same depth. So in fact, because the accessory structure will be set further back in the property, it'll be even more diminutive. So it will be subservient, was the word I think we used last month, to the house itself. On to materials. The bottom of or rather the veneer at the grade will be painted brick. It will be applied before the landscaping is filled in. There will only, as noted, be enough room really for a couple of rows, perhaps, but it will be a painted veneer brick, again, matching or hinting to the original structure of the home. Windows will be wood clad, and they're single hung, and they're standard 1/1. Again, matching to the period, matching to the house. In some of the windows in the house, candidly, some of them have been replaced over time, but for the general mostly part, it's 1/1 in most of the house. The sill, that was a question that came up, is angled, provided with the window, of course. It's built into the window. JELD-WIN is the window that we've used in the past for window replacement and plan to use it here again. And you can see that it slants in and over the board that sits below the window trim itself. And HardiePlank is the choice for the siding and also the trim, which I'll cover in a minute. This is an example. It's smooth it's the historic lap siding, and it's designed to mimic the original siding of a period of time. And then, of course, all of the trim itself will be a HardieBack, depending now, what's shown here is multiple sizes, because depending on the trim that we're dealing with, it's going to be dimensional to that. And the rafter tails will be wood, yellow pine, and again, matching what is the design feature period appropriate and design feature of the house itself. And the soffits themselves will be beadboard or tongue and groove beadboard shown here, and those will be the soffits or underneath the soffits themselves. And then there's going to be a drip edge for the roofing, which is the drip edge is here. That will be visible and shown and aligned along the roof edge. And the shingles will be asphalt shingles. Again, I believe period appropriate, but matching certainly what's on the main structure. The doors themselves will be of this design. We replaced the doors in the original structure with this exact door, so there will be continuity between the two buildings in that sense. And it is, we went to the ARC folks, and they suggested a number of different designs, and this is the one that they had recommended, or one of the ones that they had recommended, so it is period appropriate. And this is the garage door. It's a Copley, and it is steel. I think that was a question that was brought up last time around, but we found those details for you. And that ends the presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ron Velam, staff with Historic Preservation. Staff's finding that this application is consistent with the Hyde Park Design Guidelines. We reviewed these plans on April 15th, 2024. On page 3 of your staff report, we did have some conditions. The majority of the conditions were addressed this evening. I'd just like to go through a couple of them. There were some concerns at the initial public hearing with the driveway coming in with the ribbons, and there was some ambiguity with his drawings. Today, he showed a picture of the intent of what his design and hopefully approval is going to be. The mechanicals were addressed. They're under the stairs. As I stated, this is not in a flood or within FEMA's boundaries, so it could be on grade. They don't have to be elevated. The windows, there was some discussion about the windows, but he did show a cladded window with a 1/1 design. There is a design exception that is in process right now. That's a joint review that it comes through preservation, and then it is reviewed by zoning as well. The design exception is for the additional height for accessory structures within the city of Tampa. All accessory structures are allowed to go to 15 foot in height from the measurement through zoning. Through the historic district's reviews, it can go up to 22.5. And he's illustrated this evening that it will be capped at 22.5. So that process has been started. After today's approval, it'll be routed if the approval is granted. He did not address the fence. He has a perimeter fence in the backyard. I believe the fence is going to remain, or you can ask him additional questions as it enters through the apron. And I believe that completes the review that we had, and I'll be here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we will now ask questions, beginning on my right with Mr. Prokop.
Hi.
Hello.
Fence.
Fence?
What are you doing with the fence?
It will remain.
Okay, but the gate is going to change size because your curb cut is going to change size, so that has to be rebuilt?
The gate is big enough, it just, in terms of its width, to cover a 2-car garage, so we intend to reuse the gate itself.
Okay, it will have to move, though,
I believe so.
to accommodate that new, wider curb cut?
Yes.
In the curb cut, are you planning on using the sunken granite and matching the existing details that you have there now?
Yes.
At the edge, okay. I think you basically hit all the points. I know you worked hard at it, can tell. You came prepared. I have no further questions.
Mr. Hammond.
I have no questions.
Ms. Ketchum?
No questions.
Hi, good evening. Nice to see you again. And I agree, I think it looks like you've done a lot of work. I appreciate that. I have 2 questions. One is maybe more technical, and then one is more material. On the technical, and maybe it's for staff, I had this question, I think, in the last time. It's just the orientation the plans, maybe I'm missing it, but it doesn't seem right. So I know the property is at the intersection of Gunby and Richardson. Gunby runs along its eastern frontage, and Richardson is its northern frontage. Is that correct?
It's actually northeast, southeast. It's
I
not.
know Richardson curves somewhat,
Yes.
but what's confusing me is on your elevations, you're calling the right elevation, I think you were calling it south. The elevation that has the garage, that's your east elevation. But
It's-
you're referring to it,
It's northeast actually, it's interesting you brought that up, and I'm sure my wife is happy to hear it, because she suggested that I put in northeast, southeast, and I oriented, the purpose of the orientation on the presentation was just for ease. So it was just to help everybody understand where it was visually, because that was one of the questions that I think we had last time.
we did. So I think the question is for staff, and again, this is probably not material to the approval, but I think for the record to reflect accurately, it seems very off.
For the orientation, the cardinal directions on the plans?
Yeah, on the elevations. The elevations they reference right and left versus the north. Right is only relative to where you're standing. It just, for the record of, a historical entry and somebody back, looking 50 years in the future, should we not reference that as the eastern side versus the northern side versus the southern versus the west?
Ms. Post, point well taken. Usually we try to use the cardinal directions, so we could change that if that's the direction of the board.
Again, I don't think it's material to the approval, it just seemed, and you said it more elegantly, the cardinal directions. So thank you.
Yes.
And so then more materially is on the height. So to staff, the question of, this is going through for a DE in excess of 15 feet, coming in at 22.6. And if the home is if the main structure is 22.6, then this is not subordinate in height. Was that not our requirement, was an expectation that it would be subordinate ever so slightly?
Well, I think there's different items that go into what makes a structure subordinate. And as I pointed out on the Sanborn map, I think that the material selection of the primary structure with the strength that it has in the base, from the bricks on the base to the architectural elements that are much more evident in the primary house, this is a simple structure. And then as the owner stated, there's a drop in grade of 2 foot. So as you see it in reality, it's gonna be lower. And then also the accessory structure is set back from the plane of the primary house. So the illusion will be that it's dropped as well. So the secondary structure, the accessory structure is very simple. It's wood, it doesn't have a lot of frills. I think that makes it subordinate as well.
Okay, so if staff is comfortable, we'll
I am
defer to
comfortable
that.
with it, yes.
Thank you.
And I have just one question. Can you go to to the page in your presentation that shows the soffit, please?
Yeah, excuse me, would you mind pulling the presentation up, please? I don't have control of the presentation, so. His name? Oh, there we go.
There we are.
Yes.
So which are you intending? Are you intending to have a flat soffit? Or are you intending to have the beadboard go on the undersurface of the roof deck and then show your rafters, your rafter tails?
Yes.
So that's the
Yes, the beadboard will be, in essence, the roofing material. So it will replace yes, it'll replace the plywood.
So the detail that you're showing us is actually incorrect. And we just need to know, I just would like you to
Okay,
see how that works, that you've got you're showing a flat soffit, when in fact it's just, you're putting the beadboard on the underside of the roof deck, and so that's going to be an angled surface following the angle of the roof.
it will, yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you. Okay, any further questions? Okay, so you have 5 minutes for rebuttal?
I don't have any comments.
Okay,
Thank you.
so we have, I'm going to do a last call before we close the public hearing. Okay? So we can now discuss the case. I'll start with you, Ms. Ketchum.
I have no comments.
Okay. Mr. Hammond?
No, I have no comments.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah,
he answered all of
yeah.
the questions that came up. Carol brought up, Commissioner Carol brought up the height issue, which was, and subservient can happen in multiple ways, in massing materials, detailing, level of quality of materials in all kinds of ways. So, and being lower in grade, being downgrade. So I think that was a good question to clarify. Thank you. Yeah, I think he answered all the questions we had, and made sure that we saw in the site plan that the hardscape will extend around from the garage entry around to the granny stairs so that there's access, because that was missing the last time they came through. Yeah, I think the questions have been answered.
And so I believe we are perhaps ready for a motion. And I just want to point out that I believe there is a condition as the design exception. is not-
Right, the design exception, correct. I move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in ARC 24-000-0032 for the property at 1800 West Richardson Place, with the following conditions: that they obtain the design exception from 15 feet to 22 feet 6 in height, because based upon finding of fact, the proposed project is consistent with Chapter 27 of the City of Tampa ordinances and the design guidelines of the City of Tampa.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. And do you understand all of the conditions placed on your certificate of approval?
No.
You are in the process of requesting a design exception.
Yes.
So you can go from 15 feet to 22 foot 6.
Yes.
And so we have said that we have approved the documents submitted. However, the final approval will come when you have that design exception.
Yes, it's
Okay.
interesting because they told us that they were waiting for you. So, thank you very much.
Commissioners, Elaine Lund, Historic Preservation Staff. The next item on our agenda to be reviewed this evening is case ARC 24-0000149 for the property located at 414 East Amelia Avenue in the Tampa Heights Historic District. I'll be doing a quick a quick photo presentation here, but as we get started, I'd like to point out that this application that's before you tonight is for a certificate of appropriateness to replace the wood siding that was on the structure with hardy siding. There has been some additional rehabilitation work done to the structure. It was done without approval from this board or without permits, so the property currently is in violation. We are working with the applicant to make appropriate changes to some of the things you will see in the photographs. However, this is one item that the applicant has requested that we cannot approve at the staff level, so that's why you are seeing it before you this evening. To begin the photo presentation, we have the Tampa Heights Historic District map. The subject site is shown in green, if you can see that there. It is about midway through the historic district. Moving in a little closer on the Sanborn map. Get this. Sorry, they updated the software here, so. You're seeing the 1920s Sanborn map here with the subject site shown in green. And it's on the north side of Amelia Avenue between Jefferson and Central Avenues. It's shown on the Sanborn map as a one-story wood frame structure with a full-width front porch and a small, what was then an open porch in the rear. I believe that has since been enclosed. And then we have the present-day aerial photograph of the site, again, at the north side of Amelia Avenue between Jefferson Street and Central Avenue. You can see the proximity to the interstates off to the east there. This is a photograph of the subject property from 2019. You can see the wood siding on the building. It was on the building at that time. It's a novelty siding or a drop siding, as it's sometimes called. So there is a difference there between the profile that you will see on the original wood siding. And this is the siding as it exists now, after the work has been done. The hardy siding on the building. This is the south side or the front of the subject property. This is its east side. You can see a bit of that enclosed rear porch there. Just to be clear, that enclosed rear porch was enclosed prior to the work commencing. This is the west side of the structure. And the rear of the structure. This is the building directly to the east. And the new construction site to the west. And there's also new construction directly across the street. This is the view looking east along Amelia Avenue towards Central Avenue, and the view looking west along Amelia Avenue back towards Jefferson Street. At this time, I'll have the applicant come forward and present their request.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pedro Domenigo. I'm a residential contractor in Tampa. I don't have much to add. This is a project of much smaller magnitude than the previous. I do want to add this photograph that I believe will help show what I'm trying to point out here. So this is halfway through the job, and it's labeled, this zooms out right. Yeah. So I labeled where the old siding is, where the new siding is, for a visual on how the appearance is still all the same. And then I just want to read over from the staff report a couple paragraphs that I think kind of support this idea that I'm saying. This is citing pages 25 to 27 of the architectural, I forget what it's called, but whatever the code is. So it says, if it must be replaced, and that's referring to the wood siding, the new siding should match the original as closely as possible. As you can see in the picture, I mean, down to the very level of it, it's kind of, it's all pretty much visually the same. Especially with respect to board size and width exposure, all 100% match. It's a 7-inch board with a 6-inch exposure. The original corner boards also should be retained or replaced in their full original width. It's exactly what we did, all 1x4 corners, exactly how it was before to mimic the original look. It will retain the scale, appearance, that's, basically everything we were shooting for in replacing the siding originally. So, should not run continuously around corners. We didn't do that. We kind of try to just keep the same exact look, and you can see that from the photographs. But put the new material, which is a little bit more durable. It's just going to hold up better. Is all it is. There you can see the old and the new, and it's just like you can't really tell where it starts, where it ends. So that is all I have to add to that. And I appreciate you guys taking time to review this and consider me for an approval.
If the applicant's finished, I'll proceed with the staff report then. Staff found that this application was inconsistent with the Tampa Heights design guidelines and the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. As the design guidelines and the Secretary of the Interior standards both state, the key to a successful rehabilitation is maintaining the characteristic details and the historic fabric. The preferred hierarchy is repair, and then the rehabilitation guidance allows for replacement of a character-defining feature with a new material if there is a certain level of deterioration or damage to the materials that are existing on the structure. The preferred option is the replacement of the feature in kind with the same material, such as wood for wood, and replacement with the replacement material matching as closely as possible the size and proportions of the historic material. As I stated before, the original siding on the house was a novelty siding. Hardy's not available in that particular profile, so this is more of a the Hardy board. And with that, I don't have anything else to add, except that the modifications along these lines would damage the integrity of the contributing status of this circa 1902 building. So I am available if you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Is there any public comment? Hearing none. Commissioners, do we have any questions? I'll start on my left with Commissioner Post.
Hi, good evening. Maybe starting with staff. So the work is complete or partially complete?
The siding has been completed.
Okay.
There are still some outstanding elements that are part of the overall project that we are working with the applicant on to make sure that those elements are consistent with the design guidelines.
Okay. So obviously never good to have initiated a project without a permit, assuming as a
May I comment on that?
Let me ask a couple of questions first, and I'd love to hear from you. Just, so that's not the issue before this group. My question is, what material would be the only material that would have been appropriate for replacement? Would there be any composite or alternative to wood that would have met staff's approval?
Not for staff approval, no, ma'am.
Okay. So for this body to approve it, are we setting a precedent beyond which the code would typically approve?
As we look at each property on a case-by-case basis, we always hesitate to talk about things as precedent setting, of course. However, this board would have to direct staff for that to be an overall approvable structure and
Okay.
for staff approvals. We would not begin to take that on as something we could approve on a staff level
Okay.
if you approve this one.
So I'll just comment, and then I'll defer, and then I think it'll come back to you to respond to all of the inquiries that you might hear. As I've commented on this before, that in my short time here, but I think the inconveniences of having these historic homes are many, and particularly faced with the needs of our contemporary lifestyle, that synthetic materials and alternatives they're so common, and they tend to look fine, but at what point does it become, are we degrading the purpose of historical preservation? So this one, just at first blush, strikes me as it's problematic. I don't know if we find this not acceptable, does it require the removal of all of the siding that's been installed? It's a very difficult case. I'm really troubled by the death by 1,000 cuts to the historic preservation. But I recognize the reality of the situation that the owner and the contractor are faced with. So I'd like to just hold my thought, and I welcome my colleagues' observations.
If I can defer, I'll pass for right now for the rest of the comments.
All right.
I have a question for staff. It appears to me, not the siding kind of aside, but the detailing around the windows and doors, I have an issue with as well. I mean, did staff work with the owner and contractor about the proportions and sizes of trim and other elements that are on the structure?
To answer that question, sir, no, we have not addressed that issue as of yet. That's something we're sort of putting on hold while we work out the siding issue.
Okay.
And also to answer that question maybe a little further, the applicant did match what was on the house, so that had been altered at some point from probably what was originally there, the trim around the windows. Essentially, it may not match like inch for inch what was there before, but it is, the windows were previously basically like picture framed.
Thank you. Mr. Prokop?
A couple questions. I know you wanted to address something earlier. Why was a permit not obtained?
Well, I've been a contractor for a few years. I did some legwork on that because we were only replacing the cladding. I called a few old contractors, asked them questions. I called the city, and I was given sort of ambiguous answers on that. But the bottom line was like, you don't need a permit for this. So I went ahead and did the work.
Okay.
That's
Were
the
you
reason.
aware that you were in a historic district?
That I was not aware of. I'll be 100% honest with you guys.
Who owns the property?
It's a gentleman that rents it out, Nathan Parson. So he's out of
Okay.
state. He didn't
So-
tell me anything about being in a historic neighborhood or anything.
I mean, we know that that's always been an issue with, ignorance is not
I own that 100%.
an excuse for not following the law.
Right.
I don't know what the speed limit is on certain roads, but I can still break them.
Yeah.
Is the hardy board finish smooth or textured?
It's textured to match the wood.
Okay. That's actually a bad thing. Is there a reason that the novelty siding with the OG, or the scoop and the,
It was specifically asked by the homeowner to do the Duroc,
to,
to do the hardy siding, I'm sorry, the hardy siding.
obviously the owner knows that he's in a historic district.
I believe that he's ignorant to the fact as well.
I mean, it's in a deed, it would be in a purchase title search. Anytime you buy a property in a historic district, it's quoted as such. You started to read, page, I guess you said 25 to 27 of the historic district guidelines. And I think you stopped before you got to some of the wording in there that, that addresses that not only is it to match appearance, but, since it's a contributing structure, it's supposed to match the materiality. And that's the main issue here, is that it doesn't match the materiality. The fabric is also, if you define historic fabric, additions to historic buildings or outbuildings to historic buildings, if they're not contributing structures, can have alternate materials. But historic structures in particular need to have the historic materials maintained, or it's no longer a historic building. By changing the materials on the building, you basically destroyed much of what made it a historic building. And I understand it's for maintenance purposes and for longevity purposes and all that kind of stuff, which if you're outside of a historic district is the right thing to do. I don't have any other questions. I think you answered the ones that I did have. Thank you.
Commissioner Ketchum?
Hi, why was it removed in the first place? Why was all the wood removed?
It just, it looked like some areas were, sort of a little dilapidated in some areas, and the owner decided just to do the entire structure.
So some of the wood actually was fine?
I mean, potentially, if we were to look, I don't know, because I threw it on, I had my guys throw it in a trailer and haul it out, but potentially, maybe some of it was usable.
Was your instruction from the homeowner to go ahead and replace all the siding?
Correct. That was exactly what he hired us for. He didn't want to see a scrap of that old wood or try to preserve it or anything like that. What I've learned from all this, if it's worth anything, is that the next job I take, especially if it looks like an older building, I'm going to triple, quadruple check if it is in a historic neighborhood, and I will obviously never make this mistake again.
Have y'all worked with staff to determine if there's an alternate and is the alternate that the staff is proposing is go to wood, take off
Yeah.
the siding and put
I'll let
wood?
Elaine speak on that, but I believe that the only alternate would be to rip everything back off, redo everything with wood. And the point that Elaine was making earlier was that there were some areas, like especially along the back side of the house, that were already hardy siding.
Okay. Elaine Lund, Historic Preservation Staff. Staff's recommendation would be would have been to replace with wood in the areas where the wood siding was deteriorated to the point that it needed to be replaced. We always recommend in cases with buildings that have their original siding that they only remove the boards that are necessary to be replaced, so repair and replace in kind, and to weave in the new wood so that it is not visibly visible where the work has been done.
Okay, are there any further questions?
Yes, sir. What is surrounding this? Contributing structures, non-contributing structures, a combination? I'm just looking on the Google map.
Yeah.
It's
If-
obviously, it runs right up next to a number of other homes.
This particular block has a series of non-contributing structures along it appears from the district map. There's the buildings on either side of it are non-contributing. One is new construction, one is an older building that has been altered extensively, and the building that's across the street are new construction as well, I believe. There's a contributing building on the corner, opposite facing Central Avenue, and I believe it looks like there's a contributing building on the northeast corner of Jefferson and Amelia, as well as a contributing building on the south side of Amelia.
From what I saw, I think it's a 50-50 between contributing and new. I know the building to the east is a new building, so it's not contributing. The one to the west is, and the one across the street for sure is a new building as well.
Mr. Fernandez?
Good evening, Dennis Fernandez, Architecture Review and Historic Preservation Manager. I want to just provide a little bit of context to the staff's approach with requests for this extent of work. So normally for administrative level reviews, if someone would come in and request siding replacement, we would limit that to a threshold of about 25% per elevation. And that would be within a matching original material of dimension and type. You know, as the Secretary of the Interior standards guides us to repair and replace, I think repair is another word for preserve. You're supposed to preserve the original materials, and then if you have to replace those, you replace those with a like type of material and dimension and design. So something that is comprehensive like this, in fact, ironically, I just had a conversation with another property owner that's going to be coming to you in the future that is requesting this in the foreground. If this had come into us and we were able to work with the property owner or the contractor, we would have tried to guide them to restore some of the original elements as well, such as the trim, which we know is not the correct type of trim. It would have had a sill, would have had dog ears over the top and on the sideboard. So we would have kind of worked with them at that time to hopefully bring the structure back. And that's what the point of the historic district is. Tampa Heights is one of the newer historic districts, around 20 years old. So there's still some structures that are being restored within the district that haven't been had the opportunity to do so yet. So our program is placed prior to permitting so that we have that opportunity to properly address the deficiencies of potentially contributing structures and then restore those back to a historic appearance. Siding is definitely an activity that requires permitting. It is a major rehabilitation and is permitted every day in the city. Other elements of this, if it were just the trim, would not necessarily be require a permit, but still would require a certificate of appropriateness. So as you weigh this unfortunate situation, we place this before you because at a certain threshold, I do not authorize an administrative approval because it is inconsistent with the design guidelines and the Secretary of the Interior standards and Chapter 27 of the code. So that's why we schedule this before you in a public setting so that the public can participate as well. This did come in as a violation that was called into us from the public.
Thank you very much. And I have one further question, Mr. Fernandez, and that is the particular kind of siding that was on the house previously, variety siding, what was it?
I believe a novelty siding.
Novelty siding. It's an unusual configuration, and you would have required that they, if they were doing, because they would not have been able, had it come before you, to replace all of the siding, they would have been required to replace those pieces of siding that needed to be replaced, or those portions of walls, with the same sort of siding that was there previously in terms of its configuration.
So one of the nuances of siding that's 120 years old is that it's somewhat petrified. And it's very difficult, if anyone has a historic house, to even drive a nail into something that's 120 years old. So we caution property owners, because often paint builds up on it, there's scarring, there was different utilities that have been added and taken away. So we caution property owners about trying to make it look new and contemporary flush look, because that brings with it a new material that maybe is not as resistant to the elements as the original material. So we're very systematic in what we would approve for replacement. That type of siding is still available. It's, at a lumber yard, you can pretty much get most of these types of siding. However, the lumber that you're getting is new growth lumber as opposed to the original heart pine lumber. So there's some issues with that. But I think in addition to being a regulatory type of body, we also give technical advice and try to guide property owners and homeowners to be able to find these materials that are unique and ultimately in their best interest. That siding was on the house most likely for most of the body of that building for 120 years. We don't really know how long hardy board's gonna last. It hasn't been around that long, but my guess is not 120 years.
Thank you.
I have another question for Mr. Fernandez. If this is denied today, what is an acceptable siding and siding profile that staff would recommend?
I would think the appropriate thing would be to restore the original type of siding to the structure. That would be in accordance with, our preservation practices, and I think very common to how other approvals have been done over the years. If you're doing an addition or if you're doing a major part of a reconstruction, you would try to use the original profiles and original dimension to have that come back to the original appearance. I think particularly when you're looking at Tampa Heights, which is, essentially the original suburb of the city, there's a character to these small cottages that are throughout that district. And those nuances of profiles of siding and window types and depths and shadows is really what, culminates in the character of a building. So I tend to be very conservative in how I approach those types of decisions, and I think that level of caution usually errs on the appropriate precedent that's been given to me through numerous hours of education on the subject of preservation.
Thank you.
So I have one other question for Mr. Fernandez. So to your prior question, are there other features of the home, like the windows and doors, that still need to be addressed for this property?
I think the priority this evening is the use of hardy board. I think that there are other issues with the window trim and door trim that kind of goes hand in hand with that. That's going to have to be rectified as well. But those are the major issues. I believe, was there hardy board used in the columns as well, Elaine?
I'm not certain.
Okay. Well, perhaps, I didn't visit the site, but if there were, then those columns should be back to the wood
Would have
columns
to
as
be
well. And
replaced as
that's
well.
part of the violation process that will need to be remedied depending on the decision this evening and how this progresses through the enforcement process.
And one last question, the non-contributing properties that I take it are on each side of this property, do they have, what materials did they use? Do we know?
So non-contributing structures, non-historic structures can use contemporary materials that are deemed appropriate. Those are usually materials that are compatible with the character of the historic area, because the non-contributing structures are essentially being introduced to maintain and really accentuate the character of a historic district. So like we looked at in the preservation in progress presentation at the beginning of our meeting today, you know, those structures are mimicked after the historic structures. And in doing so, in that particular, you know, dramatization of a historic neighborhood, you can see how it culminates into a particular characteristic for the area. And I think that, you know, that's something that pays homage to the contributing structures. It doesn't override the importance of the contributing structures. That's the main focus of a historic district, is to protect historic structures. It's a finite resource that can't be reintroduced into the district. If you lose one, then your numbers get reduced by one. And there can't be another one. A non-contributing structure that was built to look like a historic structure will never be a historic structure.
Chair, I have
Yes.
a couple of questions for Dennis, I think, for Mr. Fernandez. So following that line of thinking, and I'm not suggesting that the owner would take this path, but if they were at this point, they've degraded the historic aspects of the home so much, would it be at a point where they could have it declared no longer contributing? Has it crossed that threshold? Again, I know that's,
I mean,
there's a judgment involved, but
I mean, there's a process for that. I would not advise for someone who, in this particular type of situation, I mean, the appropriate path is to restore the structure and bring it back, not to try to demolish it or to create non-contributing status.
so where I was going with that, it seems like we are all uncomfortable with what's occurred and the degradation of the historic nature of the contributing structure. And then I'm sure we're also struggling with the, you know, just the reasonableness of an investment that was made, presumably to improve the condition of the property when, from 1902, pretty lengthy time. Is there, I don't know if you've encountered this before, but is there a middle ground solution, which maybe it sounded like you were going to, or could we impose conditions on further improvements that would enable the siding to stay, but impose actually additional conditions on windows, trim, doors, other things that were not even requested or anticipated to change, but such that we would somehow balance what would now be considered still historic materials, et cetera, just so there would be, the siding would have swung the pendulum one way and we can try to swing it back without having to remove everything. I'm just putting that thought out there.
So my response to that is that you act in accordance with the Secretary of the Interior standards and the design standards for the city of Tampa, and that the basic action of removing the siding and replacing it with synthetic material is not consistent with those reviewing principles. So it's ultimately up to the commission on what path it takes. However, the basic guidance that's provided to you, it's even in your motion, is that it's consistent. So you would need to discuss that, I believe. I mean, I think from a preservation approach is that you know, if there was a structure that's coming in to us that is not in this particular situation, but that has been altered, our approach would be over time to try to bring that structure back to the original materials.
Thank you.
If I might add, Dana Crosby Collier from the City Attorney's Office. The noticed item before us today really relates to replacing the wood siding with hardy, and that's what we have noticed for this public hearing and what we're taking on today. So just bear in mind that that's what's before you today. As Dennis said, a lot of things that come down the road, like the windows and other things, as Elaine was saying, a lot of that can be done by administrative approval, or they may have to come back. But I just don't want us to get too far outside the scope of what was noticed for the public hearing for today and what's really before you today.
So I have a question. If we deny it, then what's the next step?
It's a code of-
So so the next steps, if there were to be a denial, in order for the project to come before you again in any sort of meaningful way, it would have to have a substantial change. So there's, within your code, it says that if you're denied, you cannot return to the board for a certificate of appropriateness on the same matter for a year. So the applicant could request a petition for review in front of city council. That would be if they felt that there was some type of error or information that wasn't considered at this particular hearing. That would be forwarded to them in our decision letter. They would have the opportunity to file that with the clerk, the city clerk's office. The staff would come and essentially advocate for the position of the board that was articulated in your motion. Or the applicant could agree to reverse what the issue is. There's a code violation that's sort of tracking this as well. And we would work with them over time to try to correct that.
So I have one question for the gentleman behind you, if I'm still.
Yep.
So I think you can see that we're troubled by the actions that were taken, but also what to do.
Rightfully so, and I appreciate it.
Yeah,
I
so
can see.
what do you think the solution should be?
As I've told Elaine before, I'm more than happy, well, not happy is not the right word to use, but I'm more than willing to rip it all up and redo it with the wood. However, I'm probably digging myself a further hole by saying this, but I just want to put it out there. The historic integrity of the building has already been affected. So even if we use the same exact wood material, as my friend Dennis was saying, it is not 125-year-old wood. I mean, we're going back to, like, in appearance, it would be the same, but it's still not the historic building that it was. So for that, I'm truly sorry. I didn't know that the historic situation was that big of an impact thing. But then I guess what I'm trying to say with that is we're back to looking the same way, but we kind of are already there. I mean, the building as it stands kind of echoes the vernacular idiom of the rest of the architecture. And so the solution here, which is to rip everything off and put wood, really puts us like in the same situation. It looks the same, but it's not really the same anyway.
Have you discussed this with the homeowner about ripping it off?
I
and
have
putting
tried
wood?
to trouble my homeowner as little as possible, because that's the nature of what I do, is just like taking on the work and just, you know, giving stress to the homeowner. The complexity of this job also, just to give some background, is he's an out-of-state owner. He manages his company. He manages the house through a property management company. And so I stepped in to help these individuals because the owner of that company is a good friend of mine. I would normally shy away from jobs like this, but I stepped in to help, and I stepped into a bear trap is what I did. I should have known better, but anyway, I have not discussed with the homeowner in great detail, again, with the hopes of being able to remedy the situation myself on the back end.
Thank you very much. Are we ready to close?
No.
No? We have additional questions?
Yes, we do.
Mr. Prokop?
Mr. Fernandez, and Dana, we know what this is motioned, for, or noted for just the siding. But as under our previous actions, it states that there is a pending re-roof of shingles and metal. So that's a previous action, but it's not completed. I'm not sure how a previous action happens without it being resolved. Is it previous if it's not resolved?
Kind of give you some context on that.
Sure. The roofing work was done also as part of the overall rehabilitation of the project. That roofing is something that staff routinely approves. We approve that on a daily basis, re-roof projects. In this case, the ARC application to re-roof has been submitted. However, it has not been finalized yet.
Okay.
So that is why I noted there that it's pending.
Okay, so it's not a previous, I guess there's no other place to
It's
put it
more-
other
yeah,
than
it's more
previous
of a
actions
concurrent
because we don't have
action.
another category for it, but I was just trying to clarify that. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I have one other comment. I appreciate you taking responsibility for this, but in the comments you made about the owner, I believe it's the owner's responsibility ultimately. And you have an absent owner who was either unaware or disregarded what is deemed a very precious asset to the city of Tampa. And so I'll defer to the commissioners, but I would not support this. But and I'm just sharing sort of what's behind the curtain, and you can let us know how far outside the lines we can color here, but I would not be comfortable approving the certificate of appropriateness. I would make a motion to deny it, but with an understanding that upon the denial, that the remedy for the situation could be a variety of other paths to take, not necessarily removal of the siding, if this were to come back to us with a whole range of other ways that that reflects commitment to the historic nature of the home. So I'll put that out there.
I guess the issue is, from what I heard from Dennis, and just for a point of clarification, is that if we deny it, then this gentleman could not come back for a year, right, on the siding for us to
Right.
approve the party board.
Dana Crosby Collier, yeah, that's exactly right. The exact application can't come back to you for a year. There has that period of time. But his remedy would be to take a review to city council, the review of this decision, that's another option. And at that point in time, we would go to city council and explain what happened, explain why you came to your decision, and then they would uphold it or remand it or overturn it. And those are really the options.
So one other procedural question for you. Are we able to continue the matter and ask this gentleman to go back to the staff and try to, given the comments that have been said today, to try to see if there is a resolution?
Yes, with the very good question, with concurrence of your applicant, you can continue a matter to a future date.
And, all right. But, yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely ask Dennis that same question and get his perspective on what options other options they can offer, other than what they've already talked to the applicant about.
Can I add another level of complexity to this? So sorry. I would like to know the time frame also, because I ship out to basic training. I joined the military in September. And as much as I really, really want to see this through and make sure it gets done, I'm sort of limited in what I can and can't do. Of course, that's not a forever thing. I come back from basic training and all that, but there's like a good 7-month lapse from September 17th until I come back.
So is there anybody in your company that takes over, or you're a one-man show?
I'm a one-man show. I wear all the hats, and I'm about to burn out.
It sounds like the time frame may depend on you, if that was an option that you wanted to take to
Repeat
seek,
that, I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
that the timing
Yeah.
really may just depend on
Oh, okay.
on you. I think what
So
you're
I'll-
hearing us say is if you, as the applicant, were to seek a continuance of this, it would possibly avoid a denial, which is a pretty harsh action to take.
Right.
A continuance allows you to continue the conversation and perhaps bring this back at a date that would be determined by how quickly you could try to seek a remedy that possibly could avoid taking all the siding down, but add other elements that restore a historic aspects to the home.
Okay.
But staff may not have any interest in like.
That's true.
You know, finding a solution there. They, not interest, that's the wrong word, but may not find that's a reasonable path.
So I just want to caution the board from this, a leading conversation that may would signal a predetermination of an outcome for many reasons, but one kind of obvious one is there may be a different composition of commissioners here at a future hearing. So I think if that's the discussion that wants to happen, it probably should just, you know, there should be a continuance motion that's made, and you can determine if it's appropriate with direction given for what should be brought back at a future public hearing. If we were looking at scheduling right now, we're looking into July, into the July public hearing. So I'm not sure how that works with the gentleman's schedule, but looks like July 8th would be that date. And if it were going to go beyond just citing, there would need to be renoticing. So that would be another factor to consider. But we can accommodate that. We just need to have the right information, be able to assist the gentleman.
Let's hope we can close the public hearing now. Okay, sir, you have 5 minutes of rebuttal time.
I don't have much to say, except that I would need all the guidance I can get as far as what direction to take, and whatever I'm told, that's what I'll do.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Public hearing is closed, and now the commissioners will discuss the case. And I would like to say that in this particular case, we have a long-established preference for smooth finishes on our siding, and that this is a, you know, that's bottom line, that's the very least, right?
Right.
The material is also extremely important, and the fact that when we lost the novelty siding, we lost part of the variety which is present in a historic district. And so it's not, that is something that I personally value a great deal. And when we look at the many of the infill structures, they're sort of, they are sort of ghost images of historic structures without, very frequently, a vast amount of character that you get from.
A whole lot less character. Yeah.
That you get from, you know, an individual owner who is out there, the particular conditions, you know, when the rail cars arrived from Georgia, there's all kinds of stuff that went into making these historic districts so vibrant in terms of their appearances. And so when we allow, and it, you know, it's very sad, this, you know, all of the wood went away by mistake, but I personally do not think that it is a good idea to, you know, to say, well, it's gone now, so we're just gonna put hardy board there.
We can put anything we want on it now that it's gone.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
And that's-
I'm in agreement with you.
So I think you can tell where I stand on
Yeah.
this, but I
It's, and I understand where you're coming from. Also, you know, a horse trade. Can we do some horse trading? But there are certain things that if you start horse trading, you no longer have a horse. And so it's really not something that you can do with, okay, we'll let you get away with that. Because what it comes down to is that what we'll let you get away with is not conforming. it doesn't meet the district guidelines, it doesn't meet the Secretary of the Interior standards, it's just not acceptable. So we'd kind of be going against our own guidelines to say it's acceptable. In addition to the fact that it's the wrong type of hardy board that would be used even for an accessory structure or a new structure in the district, which is not grained, because that's even, I'm trying to think of a kind way to putting it. It's kind of more of an insult to the original wood by a concrete material trying to look like wood as opposed to just a smooth surface that you don't know what it is. It's actually like imitation. And so that's like a double whammy in my book. Yes, it's a shame that the original wood is gone, but in my opinion, the better solution is to put back wood, even if it has to be perhaps cypress or something else, if it wants the longevity that the original heart pine had. It might not be number 2, southern yellow pine. It might be a better grade of wood, but it would also have to come back with the original profile that the original old siding had. And that, to a great extent, puts that, like you said, that little bit of detail, character, whatnot, back into the house that it's been stripped of. And it's been stripped of a lot. And to simply say because somebody, oops, and stripped a historic house of historic property and then said, come back and say, oh, I'm sorry, can you give me permission to do that? It doesn't meet the guidelines. It just doesn't. And our job is to enforce, if anything else. I mean, with some, obviously with heavy heart, because, it is heartbreaking stuff sometimes. I'll just, because we're discussing here, yeah, I'm doing another property somewhere else, and we're actually replacing the wood deck, not with plywood, underneath the roof. You don't even see it, never see it, but it's being replaced with tongue and groove decking, because that's what was there, and that's what's supposed to be there, not with plywood, even though no one will ever see it. So, ripping everything off and replacing it with artificial materials, it's not something I can accept at all. I'm just going to put that out there.
And, would recommend denial, knowing that the applicant has another step of going before city council, should they decide to.
I mean, I also would recommend denial. I think it's pretty clear. So
Yeah, so I think my only comment is I do appreciate Mr. Domenico, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, not really as the property owner, and having taken direction from the property owner to rip off all the wood, and unfortunately not knowing it was in a historic district. Appreciate him coming and standing before this panel and commission and saying, I made a mistake, I didn't know. That is a commendable thing to do, because it's hard to admit, particularly publicly, that you made, that a mistake was made. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I agree that there are guidelines that we have to abide by, and for all properties. And I was really asking a lot of the questions about the homeowner to see how active the homeowner was in the discussions, and that it came out that Mr. Domenico was essentially trying to rectify the situation on his own, which is commendable. But I, think this is a further conversation probably for him and the homeowner, and it sounds like, if there's a denial, the homeowner's gonna have to get involved in this in any event, and given timing of his entering the military, which is also commendable. So a lot of my questions were to get at kind of where the homeowner stood on all this and how involved the homeowner was, knowing that Mr. Domenico was doing the right thing by coming and saying, you know, I now know, and unfortunately we made a huge mistake on this. And that should be appreciated, I think, by this commission, but also understanding that, you know, there are guidelines that we have to abide by for the sake of the entire district. And so you know, it is with a heavy heart that I would also vote for denial, really, because I feel bad for Mr. Domenico, because I feel like this is going to be perhaps placed on his doorstep, the mistake, when he was instructed by it, but that's not the standard by which we have to operate, and we have to uphold the guidelines with respect to the properties, and that's what this commission's job is to do.
Yeah, one of the things I did realize when he was testifying is that he also brought up that he's doing this through a property manager. And the property manager who's renting the property in a historic district more than likely knows that it's a historic district also. You'd hope, you know. So there's multiple levels here of who told who what and who instructed who to do what and through whom and who's responsible. But we're not arbiters of that, honestly. We're arbiters of the guidelines that are put in front of us, and, you know, who's pointing fingers at who down the road as to who told who to do what. It's almost irrelevant.
I'm gonna read the tea leaves here and make a motion, unless does anyone else have a comment? If not, then I will move to deny a certificate of appropriateness for the file ARC 24-000149, located at 414 East Amelia Avenue, due to the work that has been done being found inconsistent with the Tampa Heights design guidelines and also inconsistent with the Secretary of Interior's standards.
I second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? I'm afraid you have a unanimous denial, sir.
I respect that, I appreciate it. Can I ask one question? Okay. Thank you, guys.
Let's see, we have some further business, I believe. I need a motion to receive and file all of the materials.
Motion to receive and file
Okay.
all of the materials that have been received and accounted for this evening.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Seeing no opposition, the hearing is closed.